What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be talking about, is the Canon R5 worth it in 2022? Let's jump into it. Coming in at 45 megapixel sensor for photos. This is absolutely crazy. You can print large photos as well as crop into those photos for, say, Instagram or anything like that. The camera shoots at 12 frames a second using the mechanical shutter and up to 20 frames a second using the electronic shutter. To be honest, 95% of people aren't going to use this 20 frames a second, but if you are in that 5% range that you just pick it up, start using it, it's an absolute tank. It's there if you do need it, which is obviously ideal. You don't want a camera that only shoots 4 frames a second. Maybe you want to shoot your kids running around, maybe you want to shoot some sports cars, and that frames per second will matter. So having that option is huge. The camera does have IBIS as well as the ability to crop in 1.6 times into photos and just shoot like normal. You know, it's one click away and it gives your lenses an additional range, I guess an extra zoom capability, which nobody can really complain at, because who doesn't want versatility with lenses? You know, you could get like a 35, an 85, and now you have 2 separate focal lengths, which is definitely ideal, especially for not being able to have a zoom lens if you want that prime look. Honestly, the camera does have a little bit better dynamic range. I do find that compared to the Canon R. Just by me shooting, editing photos, I find that the camera does withhold a lot more of the dynamic range. For video, this is where the camera honestly shines. It has the ability to shoot 8K RAW, 8K non-RAW, 4K 120, as well as a bunch of other frame rates. And I love Canon's menu system. It just allows you to quickly select what you actually want instead of having like a really thick, dense, clunky system where it just makes everything so much harder. Having these settings is kind of future-proofing yourself. I don't know anybody that has an 8K TV yet. You know, people are just getting into 4K. So the 8K RAW just allows you to get more into that cinema line of things, as well as having the ability to shoot C-Log, C-Log 2, C-Log 3. And yeah, just the camera is more future-proof than majority of the cameras out there. Like, you could probably keep this camera for the next 5-10 years and cameras will probably just be starting to shoot 8K, even maybe 12K, who knows what we're going to be shooting then. 3D went out the window and just sheer size of resolution is here now. One thing I will say, that the 4K 120 frames a second doesn't have audio. The video clips don't have audio, but I don't know who's shooting, you know, 120 for audio in general, so not really a big deal to me personally. Something that nobody tells you is 8K RAW video will burn through data on like a 128 gigabyte CF Express card. I think you're only going to be able to record for 6 minutes, maybe 8 minutes tops, and you better get some bigger hard drives because absolutely insane. You can also shoot 8K, not RAW, just 8K to a SD card. That's something else that I looked for online and couldn't find an answer. My thoughts were you could only shoot 8K with the CF Express card. But you can indeed shoot to the SD card in 8K, just not RAW. The Canon R5 has been notoriously hated online for overheating, and yes, this problem does exist. Canon just released firmware, I think it's 1.6, that allows you to negate the overheating, or at least turn a specific warning or sensor off to allow you to record more, as well as they did some tweaking to it to allow you to shoot a little bit longer, which in return allows this camera to shoot longer video in 8K or 4K. Or I definitely think that the way people were talking online was kind of too critical. I don't think the overheating on this camera is too bad, even though I do see the issue with it if you were shooting something more professional with like clients and everything like that, and be like, I need to turn off the camera, we need to take a 15-minute break to let my camera cool down. So I see it, but at the end of the day, if that's what you know you're shooting, then you should probably get a cinema camera, or the R5C. In my personal opinion, I do love the ability to shoot 8K, especially for YouTube videos. Just the storage is going to be a problem for me. With Canon's firmware update, they also adjusted something to do with the IBIS, so it doesn't really have any IBIS wobbles in the corners up in that area anymore. They're still there, but they're just not as bad or as pronounced. It doesn't really look like it's wobbling. It just looks like it's adjusting, in my personal opinion. But yeah, I haven't really played around with it too much, but it has gotten a lot better. So I'm waiting to see what other firmware updates there are to see if maybe they get rid of it completely and it just looks like you're putting your camera on a gimbal. But that's only if you're using a super wide angle lens. Like I'm using right now the 15 to 35 millimeter lens. So let's see if you can even tell that it's wobbling. Besides me walking over this bumpy ground and hitting rocks and stuff that's making the camera move. One thing I do love about Canon cameras is you have a super wide range of lenses that you can use and pick from. Like you have the amazing RF, which is the newest lens lineup. You have the EF version of lenses, which are the older SLR lenses, but you can adapt them to your Canon camera and get like a native performance, as well as I even have some FD lenses, which are more film lenses, and they're super old. I think I have a 300 millimeter f4 lens, and it's going on 50 years old, and I can still use that, as well as I think I have like a 100 millimeter lens and an 85 or something like that. And these lenses pretty much work like new. There's no autofocus in them. You need to adapt them as well, but you can still use all of these lenses, which is mind-blowing to me. Like, you buy a lens, yes, it might be expensive, but you have the ability to use it for the next 50 plus years at least, maybe even going on like 100 years possibly. So Canon's lens lineup is absolutely amazing. Even though I think this camera is an absolute tank and it's amazing, it's not cheap. So definitely don't break the budget just for this camera thinking that it's going to make you a better photographer or videographer, because it definitely won't. I will say, if you can pick it up used or look online, see if you can pick one up used and get a better deal. But there's also a bunch of hidden costs. So it's not just buying the camera and using it. Yes, you can slap any SD card into the camera and use it, but it's gonna burn up a lot more data if you're using, say, 8K or anything like that. You're not gonna be able to shoot 8K RAW. If you don't have a CF Express, you're not gonna be able to use a lot of the frame rates, and you're not paying this much for a camera if you can't use certain features of the camera. You might as well go with like the R6 or even the Canon R, in my personal opinion. So there is a lot of hidden costs because CF Express cards are extremely expensive. And yes, you can use the USB-C port on the side of the camera to import footage to, say, your computer, but it's not that great. You need to get a CF Express card reader, because instead of waiting, 10, 15, 20 minutes to dump footage, you could dump that in like 2-3 minutes. So that would be more ideal. So there is a lot of hidden costs, because even those card readers, if you're going to get a good one, it's extremely expensive. As well as make sure you have a computer that can handle all of this. Because if you have an older computer, chances are you're not going to be able to even view the footage, because the files are so big, they're so large, your computer might not be able to handle it. And then you'll have to get proxies and all of that kind of stuff, which is kind of a pain in the butt. So do your research and see if this camera is right for you. I really do love this camera. The only thing I wish it did have is maybe built-in NDs and the ability to not have the overheating at all and film for hours and hours. That would make this camera an absolute beast. But I think that the R5C covers most of that. Yeah, I just think this camera is an amazing camera. It doesn't let me down. I think it's pretty much future-proof at this point. Like, you could probably use this camera for the next 5 years, 10 years and not have an issue. It is a little heavy for me, but I'm used to heavy cameras. But if you're not used to having this much weight, it is a little bit heavier than the Canon R, but the weight isn't that noticeable until you're holding it further away from your body, like I'm doing right now where I'm vlogging. I think it's an amazing camera, and it's definitely worth it in 2022, probably even 2023 and 2024. This camera is an absolute tank. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you did like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help. And until the next video, peace.